The house was never this quiet. Andrew opened the door. No screaming, no crashing, no chaos. His sons were 5 years old. 17 nannies had quit. Nobody could handle them. But today, silence. He called their names. Nothing. Room by room, he searched. Kitchen empty, playroom empty. Then he opened the last door, and what he saw stopped his heart cold. Andrew Taylor wasn't supposed to be home. The London deal closed early. For the first time in 5 years, he said no to another meeting. He just wanted to go home. When he walked through the door that Tuesday afternoon, he expected war. That's what life sounded like with 3 boys who'd lost their mother the day they were born. But today, nothing. He dropped his briefcase. Boys? No answer. He moved faster. Kitchen empty. Playroom empty. His chest got tight. One more room. He pushed open the nursery door and froze. Joshua, James, John, on their knees, hands folded, and beside them, Sarah Jackson, the maid from Atlanta doing something no nanny had ever tried. Andrew's legs gave out. 5 years. He hadn't cried once. Not when Victoria died. Not when 17 professionals called his sons impossible. But this broke him. That night, alone in the dark, her voice came back. You can build an empire, Andrew, but you can't buy back time. And he realized this wasn't a breakdown. This was God giving him one more chance. The next morning, he came downstairs, made coffee, burned toast. When Sarah walked in, surprised, he looked at her and said, I'll stay for breakfast. Minutes later, the boys ran in, froze when they saw him. Dad, you're home? He smiled. A real smile. Yeah, I missed you guys. They sat down. 3 bowls, 1 burnt toast, a silence that felt like peace. And Andrew knew something had shifted, but he had no idea what was coming next. Before we begin, like this video, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. I hope this story reminds you sometimes God doesn't send angels, He sends people willing to stay. 5 years ago, the delivery room was too bright. Andrew stood there in scrubs he didn't know how to wear, holding Victoria's hand. She was pale, too pale. The doctors kept moving faster, their voices getting sharper, and he knew before they said it. Andrew. Her voice was so soft he almost couldn't hear her. Her eyes found his. Take care of them. 3 newborn cries filled the room. Joshua, James, John. Victoria smiled. Then her hand went limp in his. She was gone. The nurses moved around him, but Andrew couldn't move, couldn't speak. His wife just brought 3 sons into the world, and it cost her everything. He held her hand long after it went cold. He never got to introduce her to their boys. At the funeral, people kept saying the same things. Time heals. You'll be okay. The boys will get you through this. But they didn't understand. Every time Andrew looked at Joshua, James, and John, all he saw was what their birth had cost him. The woman he loved. The life they were supposed to build. Gone. All of it. Gone. So he stopped looking. The first 2 years were a blur. He hired nannies. Good ones. Expensive ones. Women with degrees and references and years of experience. He told himself the boys would be fine, that they'd grow up loved and cared for. But Andrew? He disappeared. Into boardrooms, into late-night calls, into international deals that took him to London, Tokyo, Dubai, anywhere but home. Work became the only thing that made sense. Stock prices went up. Buildings went up. Everything went up except the sound of his own sons' voices, because Andrew Taylor stopped coming home for dinner, stopped reading bedtime stories, stopped being a father. He told himself it was temporary, that once the pain faded, he'd come back, he'd be present, he'd be the dad Victoria wanted him to be. But grief doesn't fade, it just settles in and waits. By the time the boys turned 3, they stopped asking where Daddy was. By 4, they stopped running to the door when he came home. By 5, they stopped believing he'd ever really stay. And that's when everything started to break. The nannies started calling more, then texting, then showing up at his office unannounced, eyes wide, voices shaking. Mr. Taylor, we need to talk about the boys. But Andrew didn't want to talk. He'd send more money, hire more help, fix it from a distance, until the day the 17th nanny walked out, and nobody would come back. By the time Joshua, James, and John turned 5, the house in McLean had become a war zone. Not because the boys were bad, but because they were drowning. They didn't remember their mother. They'd never heard her voice, never felt her hold them, but they knew something was missing, something everyone else seemed to have. And the person who was supposed to fill that space, their father, he was gone too. So they learned to scream. Joshua was the first to break. At 3 years old, he threw a toy car through the kitchen window. By 5, he was throwing chairs. He pushed Nanny Rebecca down 3 stairs, locked Nanny Caroline in the closet for 2 hours. Nobody could stop him once he started. Anger was the only language he knew. James was different. He stopped talking at 4. Just stopped. The doctors said there was nothing physically wrong, but words felt too heavy, too big, so he screamed instead. Long, sharp cries that made the staff cover their ears, and when he wasn't screaming, he was silent, completely silent. John was the quiet one, the one people thought was fine. But at night, he had nightmares so bad he'd wake up shaking. He clung to whoever was near, nannies, housekeepers, anyone terrified they'd disappear too. And sometimes, when no one was watching, he'd light matches, small ones, just to see the flame, just to feel something warm. The nannies came with degrees, with references, with years of experience working with difficult children, but none of them lasted. Nanny Diane quit after 3 days, said the boys were beyond help. Nanny Margaret lasted 2 weeks, filed a complaint, said Joshua was dangerous. Nanny Ruth made it 4 months, longest one yet, but even she broke. Told Andrew the boys didn't need a nanny, they needed a father. Then she walked out and never came back. 17 women in 3 years. The agencies stopped sending people, stopped returning Andrew's calls. One director told him flat out, "Mr. Taylor, your sons have a reputation. No one wants to work in that house." Andrew hired private therapists, behavioral specialists, experts who came in with charts and strategies and promises, but nothing worked, because the boys weren't broken. They were just waiting for someone to see them, really see them, and no one did. Until 3 weeks ago, when a woman showed up with a mop, a quiet voice, and no reason to stay. Her name was Sarah Jackson, and she wasn't supposed to change anything. Sarah Jackson wasn't supposed to be there. The cleaning agency sent her as a last-minute replacement. No interview, no background check, just a phone call at 6 in the morning, asking if she could start that day. She showed up at the McLean house with a small bag, a reference letter from a church shelter in Atlanta, and a quiet "good morning" that nobody really heard. Andrew barely looked up from his phone. "You're the new maid?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Just clean what you can. Stay out of the boys' way." He left for the office 10 minutes later. Sarah stood in the big, silent house and took a breath. She'd cleaned plenty of homes before, rich ones, empty ones. Homes where people lived but didn't really live. This one felt different, colder. She started in the kitchen, scrubbed counters, swept floors, folded laundry no one had touched in days. Everything was expensive, everything was clean, but nothing felt warm. Then she heard footsteps. 3 boys appeared in the doorway, staring at her, not saying a word. "Hi," she said softly. "I'm Sarah." Joshua, the oldest by 2 minutes, tilted his head, then picked up a plate and threw it at her. It shattered against the wall behind her head. Sarah didn't flinch, didn't yell. She just looked at him. "You done?" He blinked. No one had ever asked him that before. James started screaming. No words, just sound, high-pitched and sharp. Sarah stayed still, waited, let him get it out. John walked over, grabbed her mop, and locked her in the supply closet. She heard the lock click, heard their footsteps run away, heard laughter echo down the hall. Most people would have called Andrew, quit on the spot, packed their bags and left. Sarah sat down on a bucket in the dark closet, pulled out her phone, and prayed. 20 minutes later, the housekeeper found her and let her out. "You all right?" the woman asked, eyes wide. Sarah nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine." "You're not going to quit?" Sarah looked down the hall where the boys had disappeared. "No, not yet." That night, after everyone went to bed, Sarah walked upstairs. The boys' rooms were at the end of the hall. She could hear them. Whispers. Movement. No sleep. She knocked softly. "Can I come in?" Silence. She opened the door anyway. All 3 boys were awake, sitting on their beds, staring at her like she was a ghost. Sarah didn't say anything at first. She just walked over, pulled their 3 beds together, sat down on the edge. "You can test me," she said quietly. "You can throw things, scream, lock me in closets. I get it." Joshua narrowed his eyes. "You're gonna leave. Everyone does." Sarah looked right at him. "I'm not everyone." James made a sound, not a scream, something softer, like he wanted to believe her but didn't know how. John climbed under his blanket and turned away. Sarah stayed there for a while, didn't force anything, didn't try to fix them, just sat, present, still. Then she started talking, told them a story about 3 baby birds who fell from their nest during a storm, how they were scared, how they didn't think anyone would find them, but someone did, someone stayed. By the end, Tommy had stopped fidgeting, James's breathing had slowed, and John, he'd turned around, listening. When Sarah stood to leave, Joshua spoke, voice small. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" She looked at him. "Yeah, I'll be here." "Promise?" "Promise." The next morning, Sarah found a small grey rock on her pillow, a smiley face drawn on it in red crayon. No note, but she knew. It was from John, and for the first time in 3 years, something in that house started to soften. But Sarah had no idea what was coming. The first week, Sarah learned their rhythms. Joshua got angry when things were too loud, so she started humming, soft, low, just background noise that somehow made him breathe slower. James drew when he couldn't speak. She found old sketch pads in the storage room, left them on the kitchen table with colored pencils, never said a word about it, just let them be there. John collected rocks. Every day, he'd bring her a new one, set it on the counter while she worked. She started giving him small jars, helped him label them. Found by the mailbox, from the backyard. He never said thank you, but he'd smile, just a little. The staff noticed, whispered to each other when Sarah walked by. "She's lasting longer than the others." But Sarah wasn't trying to last. She was just trying to see them. One afternoon, Joshua threw a chair. Not at anyone, just threw it, hard. Sarah didn't jump, didn't lecture. She walked over, sat on the floor beside him, and said, "That must have felt good." He stared at her. "What?" "Throwing it, getting it out, must have felt good." His face crumpled. "I don't know why I do it." "I know," she said softly. "Sometimes the hurt gets so big, it has to go somewhere." He didn't say anything, just sat down next to her, and for the first time, he didn't destroy anything else that day. At night, Sarah started sitting with them before bed. She didn't read books, didn't lecture, she just talked, quiet, easy, about nothing and everything. And sometimes, when the boys were really quiet, she'd close her eyes and pray, not loud, not showy, just a whisper. "God, thank you for today, for these boys, for second chances." They watched her, didn't join in, but they watched. Andrew came home twice that week, both times after the boys were asleep. He'd walk past their rooms, see the light off, and keep moving. Sarah saw him once in the hallway. "Mr. Taylor, the boys were asking about you today." He nodded, didn't look at her. "I'll try to be home earlier next week." But he wouldn't be, and they both knew it. By the 3rd week, the house felt different, softer. The boys still had hard days, still broke things, still screamed, but something was shifting. Sarah felt it. The boys felt it. But Andrew? He was in London, then Tokyo, then back to D.C. for another deal. He had no idea what was happening in his own home until the morning everything broke wide open. It happened on a Thursday morning. Sarah was in the kitchen, wiping down counters, when she heard the crash. Then another, then screaming. She dropped the rag and ran. The playroom was destroyed, toys everywhere. A lamp shattered on the floor. Joshua was throwing books at the wall. James was screaming no words, just sound, his face red, tears streaming. John was in the corner, rocking back and forth, hands over his ears. The housekeeper ran past Sarah, heading for the door. "I'm calling Mr. Taylor." "Wait." But she was already gone. Sarah stood in the doorway, glass on the floor, chaos everywhere. 3 boys falling apart. She could leave, walk out like everyone else, call it too much, say she tried, but she didn't. She walked into the room, knelt down on the floor, right in the middle of the broken glass. "Joshua," she said softly. He turned, chest heaving, fists clenched. "Go away. Come here. No. Joshua, come here." Something in her voice made him stop, made him look at her, really look. She held out her hands. "Come here. Please." He didn't move at first. Then slowly, he walked over, sat down in front of her. James stopped screaming, watched. John lifted his head. Sarah took Joshua's hands, then reached for James, then John. All three of them, sitting in a circle on the floor, surrounded by broken things. "Close your eyes," she whispered. They didn't understand, but they did it anyway. Sarah bowed her head. "God, we're really angry right now. We're scared. We don't understand why things hurt so much." Joshua's breath hitched. "But we're here, and you're here, and that's enough." James's shoulders started shaking. "Thank you for helping us. Even when it's hard, even when we break things, you still love us." John squeezed her hand tighter. Then Joshua whispered, "God, I'm sorry I get so mad. I don't know why I do it." James, voice trembling, said, "Please help us. We just want our dad back." John didn't say anything, just cried, quietly, finally letting it out. Sarah held them, all three, and for the first time in years, the house was completely still, not empty. Still, that's when she felt it. Someone watching. She looked up. Andrew was standing in the doorway, his briefcase on the floor, his face pale, eyes wide. He'd seen everything, and he couldn't move. Andrew didn't remember walking into the house, didn't remember dropping his briefcase, didn't remember climbing the stairs. All he remembered was opening that door and seeing his sons, his wild, broken, unreachable sons, kneeling with Sarah, praying. Joshua whispering, "Thank you for helping me not be so angry." James saying, "We just want our dad back." John holding Sarah's hand like she was the only solid thing left in the world. And Andrew, he couldn't breathe. He slid down the wall, right there in the doorway, his expensive suit crumpling, his chest cracking wide open. 5 years. He hadn't cried in 5 years, but watching them, watching this woman do what 17 professionals couldn't, he fell completely apart. They didn't see him, they just kept praying, and Andrew knew, right then. He'd been wrong about everything. That night, he couldn't sleep, sat in his office staring at nothing, thinking about Victoria, about the boys, about the father he'd stopped being. He thought about calling Richard, his business partner, the man who helped him build everything after Victoria died. But he didn't, because for the first time in years, work didn't feel like the answer. The next morning, Andrew came downstairs, made coffee, actually sat at the table. When the boys ran in and saw him, they froze. "Dad?" He smiled. "Hey, guys." They didn't know what to do, so they just stood there. Sarah walked in, surprised. "Mr. Taylor, you're home." "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'm home." It felt like a beginning, but 2 days later, Richard Hale showed up, unannounced. Andrew was in his home office when Richard walked in. No knock, no warning. His face was tight. "We need to talk." Andrew looked up. "About what?" Richard pulled out his phone, showed him a photo. Sarah, kneeling with the boys, praying. "About this." Andrew's jaw tightened. "Where did you get that?" "Doesn't matter." "Andrew, do you understand what this looks like? A maid, praying with your sons, acting like she's family. She's helping them. She's destroying everything we've built." Richard's voice got sharp. "The press gets hold of this? A housekeeper raising the Taylor heirs? Our reputation is done. The company's done." Andrew stood up slowly. "Richard, fire her. Today." "No." Richard blinked. "What?" "I said no." "Andrew, listen to me. I've got lawyers ready, PR ready. I even found a new nanny, Swiss, PhD in child psychology. She can start Monday." "I don't care." Richard's face went red. "You're choosing a maid over a $600 million deal? Over everything we've worked for?" Andrew's voice didn't shake. "She's helping my sons. That's all that matters." "Then you're making a mistake." "Maybe, but she stays." Richard stared at him, then shook his head, walked toward the door. But in the hallway, Sarah stood frozen, holding folded towels. She'd heard every word, every single word. And that night, she made a choice Andrew would never see coming. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the small bag she'd brought from Atlanta. Everything she owned fit inside it. She thought about the boys, about Joshua's slow smile when he didn't throw things, about James's drawings, about John's rocks lined up on her windowsill. She thought about Andrew, the way he'd stood up to Richard, the way his voice didn't shake when he said, "She stays." But she also heard Richard's words, "You're destroying everything we've built," and she knew what that meant. If she stayed, Andrew would lose his company, his reputation, everything he'd worked for since Victoria died. And the boys. They'd grow up knowing they were the reason it all fell apart. She couldn't let that happen. At 4 a.m, Sarah pulled out a piece of paper, wrote slowly, carefully, "Mr. Taylor, they don't need me. They need their father. I was just here to show them they're worth staying for. I'm sorry I couldn't be both. Sarah." She folded it, left it on his desk, then quietly walked out the front door. The early morning bus to Atlanta left at 5. She didn't look back. When the sun came up, Joshua was the first one awake. He ran to Sarah's room like he did every morning, knocked on the door. "Sarah?" "Nothing." He pushed it open. The bed was made. Her bag was gone. The jars of rocks she'd given John gone. His chest got tight. "Sarah?" James came running, saw the empty room, started breathing fast. John walked in last, looked at the windowsill where his rocks used to be. His face went white. "Where is she?" Joshua's voice cracked. They searched the whole house, every room, every closet, screaming her name. Then they found Andrew, sitting in his office, holding a piece of paper. Joshua ran in. "Dad, where's Sarah?" Andrew looked up. His face was pale, eyes red. "She's gone." "What?" James's voice was barely a whisper. "She left." Joshua's face went red. "No, no," she promised. She promised she wouldn't leave. He grabbed the desk, threw a chair. "Where is she?" James started screaming. That sound, that awful sound they hadn't heard in weeks. John collapsed on the floor, rocking, whispering over and over, "She promised, she promised, she promised." Andrew watched his sons fall apart, watched everything Sarah had built crumble in seconds, and something inside him snapped. He stood up, grabbed his phone. "Get the jet ready, now." His assistant's voice was confused. "Sir, fuel it. Meet me at Dulles in 30 minutes. He hung up, looked at the boys. "Get dressed, all of you." Joshua looked up, tears streaming. "Why?" Andrew's voice didn't shake. "Because we're going to Atlanta." "What?" "We're bringing her home." 20 minutes later, they were in the car. Joshua, James, and John in the back seat. Andrew driving too fast. Nobody spoke. When they pulled up to Dulles, Andrew's pilot was already waiting on the tarmac. "Sir, we're fueled and ready." "Good. Let's go." They were halfway up the jet stairs when Andrew heard a voice behind him. "Andrew." "Wait." He turned. Richard Hale stood at the bottom of the steps, out of breath, face pale. Andrew's jaw tightened. "Richard, I don't have time." "I know." Richard's voice cracked. "I know. Just listen. Please." Andrew stopped. The boys watched from inside the plane. Richard looked down, hands shaking. "I had a daughter once." Andrew blinked. "What?" "Emma. She's 28 now, lives in Seattle." Richard's voice broke. "She stopped calling me 5 years ago, stopped texting, stopped trying." "Richard, I chose the company over her. Every single time." His eyes were red. "Every birthday, every graduation, every time she needed me, I was in a meeting, closing a deal, building something that didn't matter." Andrew didn't move. "She got married last year." Richard wiped his eyes. "I wasn't invited. Didn't even know until I saw the photos online." The silence was heavy. Richard looked up at the boys, then back at Andrew. "Don't make my mistake. Don't lose them because you're afraid of what people think." He took a breath. "Go get her." Andrew's throat tightened. He nodded once. "Thank you." Richard stepped back, watched as the jet door closed, watched as it pulled away. For the first time in 30 years, Richard Hale stood alone on a tarmac and cried. Inside the plane, the boys were quiet. Joshua held a crumpled drawing. James clutched a rock. John stared out the window, whispering, "Please let her be there, please." Andrew looked at them. His sons. The ones he'd been too afraid to love. "She'll be there," he said quietly. "And we're not leaving without her." 2 hours later, they landed in Atlanta. A car was waiting. Andrew gave the driver one address: Auburn Avenue, the old brick church. Joshua sat forward. "How do you know she's there?" Andrew looked out the window. "Because that's where people go when they need to pray." 15 minutes later, the car stopped. Small brick building, wooden doors, quiet street. Andrew stepped out. The boys followed. He pushed the door open slowly, and there she was, kneeling at the front, alone, head bowed, praying through her tears. She didn't hear them at first. Then Joshua's voice shattered the silence. "Sarah." Sarah's head lifted. She turned, eyes wide, disbelief flooding her face. And then they ran. Joshua, James, John, all three crashing into her arms, holding on like she was the only thing keeping them from falling apart. "You left," Joshua sobbed into her shoulder. "You promised." "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." James couldn't speak, just cried, held her tighter. John whispered, "I thought you weren't coming back." Sarah pulled them closer. "I'm here. I'm right here." Andrew stood at the back of the church, watching, throat tight. Then he walked forward, slowly, each step heavier than the last. Sarah looked up, saw him, her eyes filled with tears. He stopped a few feet away, knelt down. "I let you go," he said, voice breaking. "I told Richard no, but I didn't fight hard enough. I didn't tell you." He swallowed hard. "I didn't tell you that we need you, that I need you." Sarah's breath caught. "I haven't been a father to them," Andrew continued. "I've been a ghost, running from everything that hurt. But you showed me what love actually looks like. You showed them they matter." His voice cracked. "Please, come home, not as the maid, as family." The boys held their breath. Sarah wiped her eyes, looked at Joshua, at James, at John. Then she looked at Andrew. "Yes," she whispered, "I'll come home." Andrew exhaled, relief washing over him like a wave. Joshua smiled through his tears. James let out a breath he'd been holding for days. John reached for Sarah's hand and didn't let go. They sat there in that quiet church, 4 broken people, learning what it meant to be whole again. 3 months later, the McLean house felt different, warmer, alive. Andrew came home for dinner every night, sometimes early. The boys still had hard days, still broke things sometimes, but they were healing. One evening, Andrew gathered them in the living room. Sarah sat on the couch, confused. He knelt in front of her, the boys beside him. "You didn't just teach them to pray," Andrew said quietly. "You taught me how to be present, how to stay, how to choose love over fear." He pulled 3 small envelopes from his pocket, handed them to the boys. "They wanted to ask you themselves." Joshua, James, and John each gave her a letter. Inside, crayon drawings, the 4 of them holding hands. And in wobbly handwriting, the same question: "Will you stay forever?" Sarah's hands trembled. Tears fell. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll stay." Andrew took her hand. "Then stay. Help me raise them. Help me build a home again. Not as the help, as the heart of this family." She nodded. "I will." And for the first time in 5 years, Andrew Taylor stepped fully into fatherhood. Not perfect, but present. Not because someone forced him, but because someone loved his sons enough to show him the way back. And sometimes, that's all grace is. Showing up, staying, and letting love do what money never could.